Hey GED students, it's GED question of the daytime, and I didn't want to stop talking about the subject of bar graphs without discussing a different kind of bar graph than a lot of students are used to, a histogram. So this is a histogram right here on the right, you can see. What tells me that it's a histogram is that the way the categories work. So looking down here, a little hard to read this. This says petal length in centimeters, and I can see I have these numbers 1, 2, and so on and so forth. So usually when you have a bar graph, each category stands for something different. Like I could have a bar that is for the cats, for the dogs, so on and so forth. We call that kind of data discrete, things that fit in their own separate, unique categories. In a histogram, my data is not discrete. Instead, it's categorized in one continuous grouping. So you can see here that instead of this one being right under one of these bars, the 1 is a start of a bar, and like this 2 is the end of a bar. So basically, and this one has 1 in the middle that's not labeled, but I can guess since it's in the middle, it's 1.5, or 1.5. So this bar represents all the, what does it represent? Let's read the directions here. It says the histogram shows the frequency of petal lengths of irises in one study. Okay, so basically this here is all the flowers that have a petal length between 1 and 1.5 centimeters. We have continuous data. It just keeps flowing. And then here, that's all the ones between 1.5 and 2. So it's like these groupings, these categories of continuous information. So hopefully that makes sense. So let's go take a look. Now, once again, they're asking me to make an inference. So if they say which of the following could be inferred based on the graph, an inference is not necessarily directly stated on the graph, but it would be a good assumption based on the information we've been given. A good assumption. So let's see the first one. A says, the longer the petals of an iris, the longer the stem. So I see some information here about petal length. Let's come over here to this. Does this tell us about stem length? No, this says frequency. Frequency means number of times something happened. So basically what this graph is talking about is the frequency or the number of times they found flowers of certain petal lengths. So, maybe 4 times they found flowers that were less than 1 centimeter in petal length. And there were like about 23, 24 times up here where they measured a flower that was between 1 and 1.5 centimeters in petal length, okay? So this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Hard to infer based on this graph because there's not really any information about stems at all or sizes of stems. Let's look at the next one. B says, irises, I think I spelled that wrong. That should look like that. Irises tend to have either short petals or long petals. Okay, let's consider this. So short and long are kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? We're going to argue about what exactly constitutes short or long. It's not a exact scientific phrase to call something short or long. But I do see this idea that we have 2 different groupings on this graph. I have a high frequency here in the smaller area, and then a high frequency here, and then I see this dip in the middle, that there's not a lot of medium-sized petal lengths. So I do see that this looks like a pretty decent answer. They tend to either have short petals or long petals. But, when I'm a GED student, you should just keep reading. Make sure you evaluate all your answers. So I'm going to mark this one as a maybe. Let's go on to C. Irises with petals between 2 and 4 centimeters are more susceptible to disease. So here's my 2 centimeters and my 4 centimeters. And indeed, we had something happen here that we don't see a lot of flowers between 2 and 4 centimeters. Why? Is it because they're more susceptible to disease? I suppose it's possible. So I'm going to mark this one as a maybe as well. Now let's go on to D. And I'm trying to model for you a test taking strategy here, by the way. Read through them all, cross off the ones that are absolutely no's, mark the maybes, and then reconsider your 2 maybes or 3 maybes to see what's best. Okay, so D says iris petal lengths vary based on how frequently they are watered. Now, that's probably true, that iris petal lengths vary based on how frequently they are watered. But since we have absolutely no information on this graph about watering, I don't know if that's really why they're varying. It could be that. It could be different species. It could be different colors. I don't really know the thing that's correlated to these sizes here. So I'm going to cross this off. So now I'm down to 2 answers, B and C, and I have to decide which one is better. Okay, the one that's going to be better is the one that's best supported by the graph, that the graph gives the most information to support. So let's take a look. It says B, irises tend to have either short petals or long petals. Now that whole entire statement is definitely verifiable based on this graph. We saw it right there in the graph. Short petals, long petals, nothing in between, very few flowers in between. Seems like a pretty good assumption. Whereas if I look at C, it says irises with petals between 2 and 4 centimeters are more susceptible to disease. Again, we were able to say that between 2 and 4 centimeters, there was definitely something going on that not a lot of flowers were in that category. But we don't know if it was disease. We don't know if it was genetics. The fact that I'm stretching a little too far to just add disease into the mix when disease was totally not mentioned at all on the graph. I'm going to go ahead and say that's a weaker inference than B. So I'm going to choose B as my correct answer. Now, maybe you're mad at me. Maybe you're saying, Kate, well, B and C are both decent answers. Well, that's how your GED is going to be. And that's going to be the most frustrating thing for you. There will probably be a couple of decent looking answers on almost every science and social studies test. And it's going to be up to you to determine which of the two is actually stronger. So better supported by the reading, better supported by the diagram. Look back at your question to find out exactly what they're asking. Really do your careful analysis to decide between those 2 answers. And you should, if you go slowly and carefully, get the right answer more often than not. All right, so if you have any questions about this or any other GED topic, feel free to drop it in the comments and I'll do my best to answer it.